Het-Heru, Nefer, Namaste. This is Kasank Mod Keperu with another video for you. And I want to encourage you to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it if you love the information I'm going to present here today. So the topic I want to talk about is the illusion of time. And this is an article written by Andrew Jaffe. And it's a really good article because it talks about what I've always said, that time is basically an illusion, it's not real. It's an experience of the left brain, which thinks and perceives reality in terms of space, linear space-time. And the right brain perceives everything in nonlinear space-time. Now, I just want to go and read some excerpts of the article and kind of give you my take on this, which I hope you'll find interesting. So he goes basically the order of time. According to theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli, time is an illusion. Our naive perception of its flow doesn't correspond to physical reality. Indeed, as Rovelli argues in The Order of Time, much more is illusionary, including Isaac Newton's picture of the universally ticking clock. Even Albert Einstein's relativistic space-time and elastic manifold that contorts so that local times differ depending on one's relative speed or proximity to a mass is just an effective simplification. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that's a good point there. So what does Rovelli think is really going on? He posits that reality is just a complex network of events onto which we project sequences of past, present, and future. And I totally agree with that statement, how we project sequences of past, present, and future. The whole universe obeys the law of quantum mechanics and thermodynamics, out of which time emerges. Rovelli is one of the creators and champions of loop quantum gravity theory, one of several ongoing attempts to marry quantum mechanics with general relativity. In contrast to the better-known string theory, loop quantum gravity does not attempt to be a theory of everything out of which we can generate all of particle physics and gravitation. Nevertheless, its agenda of joining up these two fundamentally differing laws is incredibly ambitious. Alongside and inspired by the work in quantum gravity, Rovelli puts forth the idea of physics without time. This stems from the fact that some equations of quantum gravity, such as the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, which assigns quantum states to the universe, can be written without any reference to time at all. That's interesting. As Rovelli explains, the apparent existence of time in our perception and in physical descriptions written in the mathematical language of Newton, Einstein, and Erwin Schrödinger, and I talked a little bit about him in a previous video, comes not from knowledge but from ignorance. Forward in time is the direction in which entropy increases and in which we gain information. All right. So he goes on here, says the book is split into three parts. The first part, The Crumbling of Time. Rovelli attempts to show how established physics theories deconstruct our common sense ideas. Einstein showed us that time is just a fourth dimension, and you know there's four dimensions. There's three dimensions of space and one of time, and that there is nothing special about now. Even past and future are not always well defined. Absolutely agree with that. The malleability of space and time mean that two events occurring far apart might even happen in one order when viewed by one observer, and in the opposite order when viewed by another. Now, I talked about this before when I said that when you create reality and you create what you call as your friends who are immediately just avatars, when, say for example, they go home and they were to call you on the phone, they would exist in a different time. And this is the state that we call of time dilation. They could literally be in the past and you could be in the future. Not by a lot, you know, but there's a time difference, time dilation. So let's go on. Rovelli gives good descriptions of the classical physics of Newton and Ludwig Boltzmann and of modern physics through the lenses of Einstein and quantum mechanics. There are parallels with thermodynamics and Bayesian probability theory, which both rely on the concept of entropy and might therefore be used to argue that the flow of time is a subjective feature of the universe, not an objective part of the physical description. Interesting, because I've always said that we live in a subjective reality. But I quibble with the details some of Ravelli's pronouncements. For example, it is far from certain that space-time is quantumized in the sense of space and time being packaged in minimal lengths of periods, the Planck length of time. So you can also see a video I talked about Max Planck and what a Planck length is. A Planck is a unit of time required for light to travel in a vacuum, so you should research that. Rather, our understanding peters out at those very small intervals for which we need both quantum mechanics and relativity to explain things. So I'm not going to go on, sorry my throat is really dry, to read everything, so I'll put the link for this article in the description box so you can go and read more about it. But the interesting thing here is that we see a lot of like physics professors and people studying quantum mechanics are beginning to understand that time is not real. It is just a perception. So we do understand, and I talk about this all the time, that the only thing that really exists is the present now moment. That there is no such thing as the past or the future. And well, some people will say, well, I actually remember the past. I can remember, going to high school and then the university and so on and so forth. Now, there's a reason why you recall something like that, and that is because we exist and perceive things through our polarized left brain, which is linear space-time. And the reason that we created the individualization or separation of things was for the sake of process, so the sake of having a start, middle, and end. Now time, and this may shock you, actually moves backwards if you want to say that there is a sense of linear space-time. And I gave the example of the guy drinking a glass of orange juice. So if the only thing that really exists is a now moment, and you live in what we call the hypnotic trance state, and that trance state, you're creating reality through synaptic connections, neurons that fire, these neurons are firing, and creating what you believe to be a solid objective realm. So if you're drinking the orange juice in this now moment, there has to be an impetus for that, which means that when I suggest to you that, hey, you're going to drink orange juice, then immediately you construct what you perceive to be as a past, which is you going into the refrigerator and taking out the container of orange juice and pouring a glass. That's how time works. It works backwards. Now, understand we're being manipulated. As I said, we're in a hypnotic trance state or a reality tunnel. So the ruling elite is constantly feeding us what they would call in hypnotherapy is post-hypnotic suggestions. So they would they basically hacked our psyche and are feeding us through frequencies, through symbols, ideas for us to create the reality that exists in the now moment, which inevitably creates what we perceive to be as a past memory to give justification to the present now moment. So how does this really work? Okay, when you're talking about past, present, and future, understand that those are just ideas that cannot have validity unless there is context to that. In other words, you can't have male, you won't understand what a male is without having female to measure it against. Or you don't understand what hot is unless you have cold to measure it against. So the concept of the future, you will not understand, or has really no meaning unless you measure it by what you would call as the present or the past. But these are nothing more than subjective positions for you to perceive them. So let me explain, because it can get really complex. Now, when you talk about these so-called fixed points in space and time, which they're not, you have to understand there are two divisions to who you are. There is the, or we can say the mind, there's the lower mind and the higher mind. The lower mind perceives things through the left brain, and the higher mind perceives things through the right brain. What does that mean? Lower mind can only perceive things in a linear fashion. The higher mind perceives everything simultaneously at once. All now moments, okay? So the idea is that there's only a now moment, right? And for there to be what you perceive as the past, you are shifting your perspective. You're shifting your perspective to that other now moment, which you are erroneously labeling the past. And therefore, when you are perceiving that now moment, which you label as the past, that present moment from which you used to perceive things now becomes the future. Because when you're perceiving, when you switch perception from the now moment to another now moment, which you call the past, then the now moment that you were originally in now has to inevitably be called the future. And then if you were to go further into the future, like a Star Wars or Blade Runner or Buck Rogers future, in order to do that, you would have to start at this now moment, right? And perceive another now moment, call that the future, looking back on the now moment you came from, and call that the past, all right? So it gets really convoluted and complex, I know, but it's a matter of your perception and how you're labeling and defining things. So understand that this whole concept of time is subjected to your perception via a fixed point in space. So, and this is exactly what Ravelli is talking about here in the article, when he says the malleability of space and time mean that two events occurring far apart might even happen in one order when viewed by one observer, and in the opposite order when viewed by another. So that means that there is no objective time, because it's going to change depending upon the observer and where they're at. If they're near a large body in mass, well, then that has a definite impact on the perception of time. All right, and even here, let me go back to here. These are parallels with thermodynamics and Bayesian probability theory, which both rely on the concept of entropy and might therefore be used to argue that the flow of time is a subjective feature of the universe, not an objective part of the physical description. And that's kind of really deep. Now, contrary to popular belief, if you want to call something reality, the only thing you can call reality is your left brain nonlinear perception, because that's really what is the fundamental principle of all that there is. Because when you start looking at what quantum mechanics tells us, or even quantum entanglement, where all things are connected into what I call is the singularity, and that is you perceiving all now moments instantaneously, that is the property of the right brain, which is devoid of, which has the principle of non-locality. So you cannot find consciousness or who you are in any fixed point in space and time. So you are part of that singularity and perceiving all things simultaneously. And as I said, that is really the fundamental principle or the baseline of everything. The coming into linear space-time, the left brain, is merely us manifesting ourselves or creating ourselves at a certain density level. Because Earth Gaia is has a property of a certain density. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so I know it's a lot to take in, but go check out the article. I think you really get a lot from it. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in the description box, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And until my next broadcast, this is Kasakma Keperu. Amen Ra.